Welcome back to our channel where we share updates and untold stories about Catherine, Princess of Wales and her royal family. Today we bring you some news. At 77, King Charles makes shocking decision against Camilla over royal heirloom. Sources close to the royal household claim significant conflict between King Charles III and Queen Camilla, allegedly related to the temporary loss of a valued royal item. The central object in these narratives was not just a piece of jewelry, but, as per the sources, a signet ring that the king had worn for over 50 years, imbued with profound family and institutional importance. The purported disappearance, which occurred shortly after the coronation, initiated what those sources characterize as a quiet but thorough internal investigation. The accounts from insiders indicate that the situation intensified beyond the recovery of a lost piece of jewelry, resulting in a direct confrontation between the sovereign and his spouse, an encounter that, if the reports are credible, altered the dynamics within the royal household and the couple's public working relationship. The sources depict a scenario in which the king, disturbed by the inexplicable loss and a series of associated events he saw as indicative of excessive influence, delivered a stern reprimand to the queen. Reports attribute specific actions to Camilla, including an unsanctioned interview as described by palace sources, a subsequent modification of her public styling and titles on official royal family channels, and the eventual disclosure that she possessed the previously missing ring. The assertions, repeated and exaggerated in some narratives, have been appropriated by critics and royal observers, inciting fervent conjecture over the monarchy's private affairs during a period of public change. Buckingham Palace has not released an official statement regarding these specific allegations. However, the detailed nature of these accounts has heightened public interest in the operational dynamics of the new sovereign's household when personal, symbolic, and constitutional factors intersect. The issue centers on an item whose importance transcends its material worth. The gold signet ring, typically worn on the little finger, serves as a personal seal in various contexts, but primarily functions as a significant emblem of lineage, duty, and personal memory for King Charles III. Its significance is multifaceted: the metal composition, the heraldic device inscribed upon it, and the succession of royal ownership all enhance its meaning. Each of these factors elucidates why the ring's loss was seen not only as a household misplacement, but as an occurrence that undermined the essence of identity and continuity for the king. The ring is composed of Welsh gold, a characteristic consistently highlighted by individuals narrating the event. Welsh gold is esteemed for its rarity and value, originating from limited historically important sources like the Clogau St. David's mine near Bontddu, North Wales. This specific mineral has been used by members of the royal family since the early 20th century. Since 1923, it has been customary for specific pieces of royal jewelry, particularly wedding rings, to be crafted from Welsh gold, a tradition established by the late Queen Mother, then Lady Elizabeth Bowes-Lyon, upon her marriage to the future King George VI. The significance of Welsh gold is thus twofold. It connects personal and dynastic ceremonies to a distinct region of the United Kingdom, while also emphasizing continuity by maintaining a nearly century-old tradition. For Charles, who held the title of Prince of Wales for an extraordinary 64 years, the use of Welsh gold imparts an additional dimension of regional and personal significance. The metal is not only physically precious, but, as the papers highlight, symbolic of a deep-rooted connection to Wales and the obligations and identity linked to that title. The physical and geographical origins of Welsh gold have created a distinct ceremonial mystique inside the family and among onlookers. Sources indicate that the restricted availability and the symbolic connection to the principality have resulted in things crafted from Welsh gold in royal possession being handled with exceptional care. They are not just replaceable fashion accessories, but often the focus of intentional curation. The cultural context is crucial for understanding why the loss of the ring was seen as a significant event. For Charles, whose life and public image had been molded for decades by his extensive preparation as heir apparent, The ring symbolized continuity, with a series of rituals and responsibilities linked not just to his roles as a son and a father, but also to the historical obligations of the successor to the kingdom. Emblazoned on the ring's surface is the heraldic emblem traditionally linked to the Prince of Wales, 3 ostrich feathers emerging from a gold coronet, accompanied by a ribbon inscribed with the German phrase Ich diene, meaning I serve. This insignia holds a significant position in the heraldic and ceremonial lexicon of the British monarchy, functioning for centuries as the symbol of the heir apparent. For Charles, whose public persona for decades was characterized by his position as heir, the presence of this emblem on the ring served as a constant tactile reminder of the apprenticeship that significantly influenced his public life. The item represented a symbolic commitment, akin to an oath. The motto clearly articulates the obligation of service, and the ring effectively acted as a wearing embodiment of that persistent theme throughout his career. Heraldic devices function on many levels as symbols of ancestry, as declarations of authority, and as vessels of collective memory. The Prince of Wales insignia has a multifaceted past, serving as a visual shorthand that links the current holder to centuries of tradition, medieval investitures, and an intricate web of allegiances within the United Kingdom. For an individual who dedicated a significant portion of his adult life to public discourse on duty, environmental stewardship, architecture, and governmental responsibilities, the ring served a dual private role. It functioned as both a personal talisman and an institutional symbol. Temporarily withdrawing such an item from circulation may reverberate beyond the private sphere and be seen as a little disruption in the seamless continuity the monarchy aims to portray. The ring's pedigree, the lineage of prior owners, heightened its personal significance. Prior to Charles claiming it as his own in the mid-1970s, the item is said to have been owned by his uncle, Prince Philip, Duke of Edinburgh, and before by Philip's father, Prince Andrew of Greece and Denmark. This transfer of ownership connects the object to the king's paternal ancestry, establishing a tangible connection to those he revered or whose legacy influenced his familial identity. Within a dynastic institution where tangible items often serve as vessels for memory and continuity, the ring acted as a little but powerful store of personal and family history, linking Charles to a father he profoundly adored and a grandfather he never encountered. The line of succession is significant because within royal houses, artifacts possess several levels of interpretable significance. They are used in ceremonies entrusted to institutions, shown at pivotal periods, and in many respects serve as a shorthand for the family's moral and historical assertions. The narrative of a ring transmitted between generations is not only the account of an object, but also a tale of continuity, memory, and the little rituals through which families and by extension the institution affirm identity and power. The ring's heritage, as documented by sources, rendered its removal a perceived affront to a lineage of stewardship that the king considered his duty to safeguard. The ring had become a recognizable and unobtrusive aspect of Charles's look for almost 50 years. It was evident during state functions, international visits, formal military ceremonies, and more subdued private moments. It accompanied him through significant life events, his marriage to Diana, Princess of Wales, the births of his sons, the eventual dissolution of that marriage, the passing of his mother, Queen Elizabeth II, and his ascension to the throne. Sources that address the ring consistently emphasize that for the king it represented more than just an adornment. They describe it as a tribute to heritage, a sign of inherited obligation, and a concrete indicator of an extensive personal journey toward the obligations of sovereignty. In this context, the ring's inexplicable vanishing shortly after the coronation had an emotional and symbolic significance that went beyond the simple loss of an item. The time is crucial and is emphasized in several narratives. A coronation as the ceremonial pinnacle of monarchical succession is intended to initiate a new era of steady governance and institutional continuity. Objects accompanying a sovereign on such occasions have an elevated symbolic significance as they are integrated into the dance of state and ceremony. The sources emphasize that the ring's disappearance shortly after the ceremonial activities created a discordant element at a critical period for the new reign, when the exhibition of unity and meticulous image management are essential. According to palace insiders, the purported finding of the lost signet ring took place shortly after the coronation, a moment of remarkable ceremonial and symbolic importance for a newly crowned king. The post-coronation period often entails a rigorous itinerary of public and private engagements, and the abrupt disappearance of an object intimately linked to the sovereign's personality, the testimonies indicate, caused genuine anguish. For a man known for his meticulousness about items and customs, and who has always shown a deep reverence for legacy, the ring's loss was seen as a personal assault and an institutional issue rather than a mere home annoyance. In response to the loss, the family launched what those familiar with the palace characterized as a comprehensive, discreet investigation. The search was allegedly thorough in both breadth and execution. Personnel conducted methodical inspections of the king's private quarters, the personal study designated for communication and contemplation, and the staterooms where he had recently been present. The inquiry was conducted with stringent secrecy procedures to prevent public panic or premature conjecture. Personnel were quietly interrogated, and inquiries were organized to minimize leaks. Security officers analyzed extensive closed-circuit security footage to trace the king's travels and ascertain the last confirmed time and place of the ring's appearance. Notwithstanding these efforts, the first stage of the operation, as reported by sources, yielded no definitive conclusions. There were no evident security breaches, no explicit eyewitness testimonies elucidating the ring's disappearance, and no readily visible signs of theft or malevolent misuse. According to reports, those conducting the probe used a blend of conventional search methods and procedural precautions that exemplify the royal household's approach to delicate issues. Personnel responsible for inventory and jewelry documentation were contacted. Records of objects transferred for repairs, fits, and loans were examined, and personal aides accompanying the royal couple during engagements were interrogated to recreate dates. While CCTV offered valuable imagery of movement through hallways and thresholds, investigators acknowledged its limitations. Precise identification of tiny things, such as rings, may be difficult without particular film of the hands. The absence of a clear trail devoid of suspicious entries, documented deletions, or identifiable recipients in the home, records exacerbated the king's apprehension, since this void implied either a very private resolve or deliberate concealment. The lack of a clear leader allegedly intensified the king's uneasiness. As the search continued without result, focus, according to reports, turned inward toward the king's inner circle. In that setting, observers noted the Queen's response, or absence thereof, started to attract attention. Charles was noticeably distressed and distracted, whilst Camilla's demeanor was seen by observers as controlled, if not aloof. Multiple aides reportedly observed that she did not engage actively in the practical elements of the search. She neither visited the investigated rooms nor regularly inquired about the progress. When the topic was introduced in her presence, her remarks were allegedly succinct and evasive. For some staff members, this perceived indifference was comprehensible as an effort to maintain tranquility during a tense home situation. For others, it seemed as a detachment that intensified mistrust. The contrasting emotional reactions of the sovereign and the consort reportedly generated a growing tension inside the family, paving the way for a more significant conflict. The social dynamics inside a royal household may be complex, since long-serving servants establish loyalties and communication channels that may not correspond precisely with official job definitions. Some aides reported unease at what they saw as a deterioration in anticipated behavior, specifically the lack of the ring and what they viewed as a change in the Queen's involvement in internal procedures. The papers emphasize that such views are significant in an organization where trust and etiquette dictate everyday operations, and where public representation depends on a disciplined internal coherence. In addition to the personal turmoil around the ring, those inside the palace observed a noticeable change in Queen Camilla's public demeanor. In the months after the coronation, she was said by some to be fostering a more forceful and independent public character. This development may be seen as a natural adoption of the duties inherent with a new and prominent function. Traditionally, the function of a consort, especially a queen consort, has been seen as one of support to the ruling monarch, offering company, performing public activities that enhance the sovereign's responsibilities and seldom eclipsing the monarch's primary constitutional responsibility. In that conventional framework, the consort's actions are orchestrated to maintain message coherence and to uphold a balance between public prominence and respect for the sovereign's precedence. Nonetheless, the accounts indicate that Camilla's public itinerary and demeanor have transformed. She has undertaken a seemingly increased number of solo appearances, oftentimes without the degree of prior consultation that courtiers had previously anticipated. She was characterized as being more passionately committed to advocating for causes of personal significance and as articulating her views more candidly on cultural and civic matters. For several observers, both inside and outside the palace, this signified a favorable and anticipated emergence. After decades of monitoring and meticulously controlled public boundaries, the consort seemed to be adopting a proactive, confident position. However, among traditionalist members of the family who value conventional notions of royal decorum, the creeping conflation of positions elicited apprehensions. They regarded an aggressive partner with apprehension, especially when gradual modifications occurred without the customary mutual consultation often practiced at the upper echelons of the institution. The changing role of a consort is not unprecedented in constitutional monarchy, where the limits of visibility and power must be continually negotiated based on personality situation and public expectation. In some cases, consorts have developed unique civic initiatives that enhance and broaden the sovereign's efforts. In others, excessive involvement has caused tension with entities responsible for maintaining the monarchy's impartial status. The accounts indicate that inside Charles's household, a comparable discussion was occurring with some servants supporting Camilla's elevated status, while others apprehended the destabilizing consequences of unilateral actions. A notable example of this evolving public posture, which garnered significant interest from royal observers, was a seemingly minor but impactful modification to the royal family's official internet presence. The designation employed following her husband's ascension, the Queen Consort, was reportedly modified on an official platform to the Queen. Observers remarked that this change, while seemingly minor in phrasing, bore substantial symbolic significance. Prior to her demise, the late Queen Elizabeth II personally advocated for the designation Queen Consort for Camilla, a recognition intended to affirm the consort's status while maintaining a distinction from a queen, regnant a sovereign in her own right. The removal of consort indicated a nuanced reinterpretation of position and identity. Stylistic modifications in official channels are significant within the realm of royal communications. Text on web pages, captions on images, and formal styles are meticulously crafted according to ceremonial etiquette. They convey hierarchical subtleties and influence public perception. A modification in the designation of a royal may be seen intentionally or inadvertently as a redefinition of rank. The absence of a clearly identifiable author for the update in the accounts exacerbated suspicions. Was it an administrative error, a linguistic experiment, or a deliberate action to express a certain identity? The uncertainty itself incited conjecture, and for an organization that depends on clear communication, ambiguity may be destabilizing. Insiders assert that King Charles did not personally approve this alteration, and palace correspondence at the time provided no definitive rationale for the modification. For royal watchers and several courtiers, The elimination of the qualifier was not only a stylistic adjustment, but a definitive action indicating that Camilla was asserting her presence with more autonomy than before. The king, according per these reports, responded with discomfort to the unilateral character of such modifications. A guy characterized as prudent and deferential to institutional processes, he reportedly felt distressed that a public modification to his wife's title might transpire without his complete knowledge or approval. The increasing unease with public alterations to the Queen's image intensified the private distress caused by the lost ring, adding a layer that merged personal grievance with institutional principle. Tensions escalated significantly after the Queen's decision to provide an exclusive interview to a prominent international media organization. Palace sources indicate that neither the king nor his principal communications staff were informed of, nor did they authorize the content of the interview prior to its public release. During the broadcast, the Queen allegedly elaborated on her views about the monarchy's future, the need for specific changes to align with modern expectations, and the possible optimization of the institution's public functions. The most prominent aspect of the ensuing scandal, as sources highlighted, was the Queen's revelation of private discussions she purportedly held with the king over these matters. During the interview, she reportedly detailed conversations in which the king articulated concerns on the continued significance of certain ceremonial customs and traditional engagements, suggesting that a modern monarchy should gain from adaptation and simplicity. To outsider onlookers, such declarations may have seemed progressive, a frank declaration of an intention to modernize. However, inside the meticulously structured communication system of Buckingham Palace, the interview was seen by many as a significant violation of the established standards of confidentiality that have always regulated royal speech. Critics saw the Queen as having circumvented the traditional avenues for expressing change by presenting private, perhaps provisional musings of the sovereign as public declarations of purpose. Individuals inside the palace contended that such revelations compromised the sovereign's authority by prematurely exposing internal discussions and circumventing the standard procedures of policy evaluation and public communication. The royal household generally functions with an internal discipline like to that of other national institutions, balancing individual expression with institutional impartiality. In a constitutional monarchy, when the sovereign's statements have significance beyond mere personal opinion, the orchestration of message is seen as a facet of statecraft as much as it is of communication. The reported interview was perceived by some in the palace as not merely a public relations miscalculation, but as a potential constitutional error that threatened to merge private advice with public policy, thereby complicating the meticulous signaling of changes within the monarchy to the nation. The purported repercussions after the interview were instantaneous. Senior advisors and communications personnel reportedly engaged in aggressive damage control efforts to mitigate misconceptions and restore a consistent public narrative. Confidential briefings were reportedly provided to certain media contacts to stress that the king's opinions had not been irrevocably changed and that any potential revisions would be announced via official channels at the proper time. Reactions inside the home were polarized. Some saw the Queen's candor as indicative of transparent leadership and a willingness to confront public apprehensions over relevance and change. Others viewed the interview as a dangerous and destabilizing maneuver that needlessly exposed the couple and the institution to scrutiny and ambiguity. Significantly, the accounts shared with reporters indicate that the interview exposed not only a violation of trust, but also a strategic disparity in approach and temperament between the king and the queen, an incongruity for which, according to sources, Charles was neither alerted nor equipped. In the hours after the interview's airing, the atmosphere inside Buckingham Palace was characterized by many in attendance as laden with unexpressed tension. The king was profoundly unsettled by what he saw as an unauthorized revelation of confidential communications. He allegedly had a tumultuous night after the broadcast of the interview. Inquiries for explanation were sent to the Queen during her absence from the palace, and she did not return until the subsequent morning. Upon her arrival, observers report that she exhibited a demeanor of controlled thought. Instead of providing prompt apologies or declarations of remorse, she advanced to the private quarters where the king was anticipating her arrival. The subsequent confrontation, as recounted by insiders, was furious, but restrained. It was not a public eruption, but a deliberate, grave interaction, characterized by candid language and emotional composure. Upon her arrival, the king allegedly spoke to her in a subdued, assertive tone that expressed both authority and discontent. He allegedly accused her of operating clandestinely, disclosing private discussions publicly, and making unilateral choices on the monarchy without his consultation. He then addressed the particular gripe that had plagued him for weeks, the lost ring. The ring is now missing. He reportedly said, before posing the incisive question, that in that account included both an inquiry and an accusation. Who took it? Queen Camilla, as reported, had a serene demeanor. In answer to the king's inquiry, she retrieved the lost signet ring from her purse and set it on the table between them. A succinct spoken comment ascribed to her subsequently emerged, which in various recountings seemed to embody the broader conflict between individual ownership and institutional representation. "What belongs to the king," she allegedly said, "is mine." The sentence's simplicity concealed its profound significance. The action and words were a significant violation for the king, an apparent seizure, conveyed with a sense of entitlement of an object that epitomized his legacy and obligations. For Camilla, as seen by supporters, the gesture may be taken as a declaration of belonging and an articulation of her entitlement after years of public service and examination to be acknowledged as an essential component of the monarchy's continuing narrative. The exact tone and context of the statements, similar to other private interactions among prominent personalities, cannot be reliably substantiated beyond the testimonies of those associated with the palace. The statement ascribed to the Queen resonated as it encapsulated the conflicting narratives, one faction highlighting custodial exclusivity and the purity of hereditary symbols, while the other underscored collaborative cooperation and the intention to create room inside the institution for a visible consort. The statement has been used by both detractors and proponents as indicative of the divergent expectations that may arise inside a marriage that simultaneously functions as a workplace. Regardless of intent, the event, as reported by palace officials, was a pivotal juncture in the couple's relationship. The implicit trust and established collaboration that formerly supported their shared public function were said to have been compromised. The king saw his confidant as an agent operating independently, while the Queen viewed the action as a long-awaited opportunity to symbolically embody and partake in aspects of the royal tradition. The conflict was not only over a ring, but also about divergent interpretations of function agency and the demarcation between private marriage and public institution. When human conflicts become symbolic for an institution such as the monarchy, they can assume a life of their own. The characteristics of objects evolve into inquiries about narrative authority, who determines the narrative of the reign, who represents the institution, and how are assertions of precedent mediated in public discourse. The stories indicate that the ring event elucidated these difficulties and highlighted them distinctly. In the following days, the palace's interior operations reportedly exhibited first indications of disorder. The Queen, who had previously maintained a comprehensive public schedule, reduced her commitments. She rebuffed invitations to public events and was conspicuously missing from many scheduled appearances. Although her departure lacked an official statement, the pattern was notable to observers. Some saw the withdrawal as a strategy to mitigate rising media scrutiny. Others claimed that it indicated a want to allow private affairs to settle and to shield the king from more public exposure. Simultaneously, the king was seen as more cautious and dependent on his inner circle of advisors. Previously, he would have consulted with his wife to share decisions and alleviate pressure. However, he is now reportedly taking a more active role in overseeing appointments, public schedules, and communications responsibilities that were once delegated to the Queen's office or managed collaboratively. These changes, however nuanced in appearance, signified a substantial reorganization of duties inside the palace. Interactions between the offices of the king and queen were more formalized. Direct communications between the pair were reportedly shorter and more commercial, according to staff. Experienced staff personnel, well-versed in the traditions and implicit norms of royal household life, discreetly indicated that the operational dynamics had shifted. Where mutual consultation and a feeling of shared purpose were formerly apparent, a more compartmentalized approach to responsibilities seemed to emerge. Commentators and royal journalists started to see a decline in the customarily portrayed picture of unity of the monarchy from the perspective of public perception. A lack of activity in the Queen's public engagements, coupled with a more reserved and deliberate demeanor from the sovereign, fostered the perception that the alliance essential for ceremonial stability had been unsettled. Institutionally, such adjustments may have enduring consequences. The consorts program has traditionally functioned to broaden the sovereign's influence in civic affairs and to provide a buffer that regulates expectations about the monarchy's apolitical stance. If the position is restricted or its operation formalized in a manner that diminishes the consort's autonomy, the repercussions may include patronages, charities, and public-facing activities dependent on the consort's active participation. If the sovereign increases scrutiny of public messages and appointments, the household may adopt a more cautious approach, resulting in delayed decision-making and heightened centralization of power. The Buckingham Palace's reticence about external conjecture on these issues, according to sources, just intensified popular curiosity. The perceived power of the British monarchy has always relied equally on the demonstration of unity and its constitutional significance. When the facade exhibits cracks, onlookers often deduce broader institutional concerns, including succession planning, public functions, and the monarchy's adaptability to modern expectations. The incident of the missing ring became as a significant emblem of the overarching challenges confronting the institution, a conflict between tradition and innovation, individual autonomy, and societal obligation, as well as continuity and reinterpretation. The narrative garnered extensive attention from both broadcast and print media, while also proliferating across social networks where conjecture magnified every detail and implication. Commentators analyzed reasons and precedents. Historians contextualized the incident within the extensive history of marital conflicts in royal lives. Constitutional specialists assessed the communication hazards. The outcome, as palace officials allegedly anticipated, was that a fundamentally private conflict was seen as a sign of institutional tension at a period when the monarchy was striving to convey stability and define a contemporary function under a new sovereign. Despite the signet ring being restored to the king, its subsequent absence from public display was, as noted by palace critics, significant. For decades, the ring had been a nearly continuous adornment on the sovereign's hand. Its intentional concealment from public view after the clash was seen by insiders as a significant gesture. Some conjectured that the king concealed the ring as a personal act of dissent, a means of distancing himself from an object he saw as tainted by its seizure and the ensuing personal conflict it had incited. Donning it again promptly may, in his opinion, have indicated to the external world that normality had been restored despite the persistent violation of trust being unaddressed. Some saw the withholding as a calculated, subtly forceful action. By concealing the ring from public scrutiny, the king may be illustrating that certain symbolic elements of his reign, enduring symbols of legacy and power, remained solely under his control. Both interpretations, as communicated by palace sources, emphasized that the struggle for the ring beyond mere materialism and ventured into the domain of symbolic power and narrative dominance. The overarching narrative, as conveyed by insiders and encapsulated by commentators, transformed the missing ring into a lens for examining various tensions, generational expectations, and personal allegiances, the changing role of a consort in a contemporary constitutional monarchy, and the difficulty for a sovereign in balancing private grievances with public responsibilities. Queen Camilla's purported acts, the removal of the ring, the unauthorized interview, and the modification of her public style, have been characterized by some as a genuine affirmation of her status and an endeavor to establish a recognized position within a long-standing historical narrative. However, their activities were seen by others, including the king himself, as an overextension that jeopardized the established limits of royal etiquette and the meticulously structured processes via which institutional change is communicated and implemented. The story implies bigger lessons contingent upon the accuracy of the reports. The episode underscores the profound significance of symbolic artifacts within a hereditary framework. Minor artifacts may have an outsized influence in preserving the perception of continuity between the past and the present. Secondly, it emphasizes the significance of communication discipline in an age when an interview or a solitary statement on an official website may resonate across worldwide media. Third, it indicates that the negotiation of public roles between the sovereign and consort is an ongoing and possibly contentious process, requiring explicit channels of communication and mutual comprehension. Although the whole reality of these events may be restricted to the palace's inner areas, the extensively detailed narratives that have emerged provide a picture of a monarchy undergoing significant personal and institutional transformation. The occurrence of the lost ring serves as a focused example of the intersection of individual actions and symbolic artifacts with constitutional symbolism and public perception. This underscores that beneath the public spectacle and ceremonial traditions, the royal family, akin to any household, is influenced by intricate human emotions and competing aspirations, and that when private conflicts arise, they have ramifications that transcend personal relationships. In the forthcoming months and years, observers will likely monitor whether the public partnership between the king and queen resumes a visible collaborative dynamic, or if this episode leaves enduring impacts on the monarchy's presentation and adaptation to the new sovereign's reign. Thank you for watching the video. Please let us know your thoughts, and goodbye for now.